does this turn into this maple syrup? This is sap, in the beginning of the maple syrup process. Many people are searching for ways to improve their health, mostly by exercising and eating correctly. And many people are starting to use natural sweeteners in their recipes rather than using white refined sugar. Maple syrup is one of those natural sweetener options. Many people are also searching for where their food came from. Today, I'm going to tell you where maple syrup comes from. My family has made maple syrup for 4 years now, and I've assisted with it every one of those years. In the next few minutes, I will go through the 6 steps of making maple syrup. The 6 steps of the maple syrup process are tapping the trees, collecting sap, boiling sap, straining the sap, boiling the sap again, and canning the syrup. We will start with the first step. The first step in the maple syrup process is tapping the trees. If you have never been involved in the maple syrup process before, you might not know what a tap is. This is a tap in the first step in the maple syrup process. It helps the sap run from the tree into the pail. Sap is the clear liquid that the trees store as food for winter. Trees should be tapped in February or March. I got this sap in April, so it's a lot cloudier than it would have been. Penn State Extension explains that after the trees are budding, the sap will boil down to an off-flavored syrup. The sap runs best when the days are warm and the nights are cold or below freezing. While you can tap any tree in the maple family, sugar maples and black maples are the best ones to tap because of their high sugar content in the sap. Because trees need to be tapped in February or early March, there are no leaves on the trees to identify them. So the only way to identify the trees is by looking at the bark. This is the bark of a sugar maple. The black maple is very similar to the sugar maple bark, except it would maybe be darker in color. This is the bark of a black maple, or a Norway maple. The Norway maple's bark has deep ridges that are very close together. Notice, once you have found the maple trees that you will be tapping, drill a hole about 1/2 inch wide, 2 inches deep, and about waist high into the tree. This hole should also be going slightly upwards so that gravity can help pull the sap down into the pail. When you have the hole drilled, you will insert the tap into the tree using a hammer, lightly. According to the Iowa State Extension, 1 tap should be used for trees 10 to 15 inches in diameter, 2 for 16 to 20 inches, and 3 taps for trees 21 to 25 inches in diameter. A pail is hung on the hook like this so that the sap can run into the pail. Some taps hook up to piping that runs through the woods like this, but we use the hook and the bucket method. The second step is collecting the sap, which includes tromping through the muddy woods, going from tree to tree, dumping the sap into a 5-gallon bucket. Unfortunately, in February and March, when the sap is running, the woods are very muddy from the snow melting and the occasional rains that we will be getting. I've slipped more than once collecting sap. When out of the woods, we pour the sap into even larger containers, such as tanks and milk cans. The third step is boiling the sap. Before we put the sap into the boiler, we strain it with a milk filter to get all the large particles, like pine needles and dirt, out. Then we put the strained sap into a boiler that my dad welded out of a water tank and sections of steel. As you can see, the boiler has 2 components. The bottom is a fire box, and the top is a large pan for the syrup, or the sap. In the back, there is a chimney that lets the smoke out of the firebox. The sap simmers for most of the day until it has reduced in size and darkens in color. The fourth step is straining the limestone and other dirt particles out of the boiled sap with a cheesecloth. This is a very tedious step since there's a lot of limestone in the sap to strain out, and we're using a cheesecloth. The fifth step is boiling the sap again. By now, there's only about 1.5 gallons sap left, so we can use a smaller kettle. This time when we boil the sap, it'll be a rolling boil instead of a gentle simmer, like before. About 43 gallons of sap reduces down to 1 gallon of syrup, depending on the sugar content in the sap. Jessie Randall says in her article on maple syrup production that sap normally has 2% sugar content, while syrup has 66% sugar content. The sixth and final step is to can the syrup. Since the syrup is still warm from the boiling, it will seal well in the jars. When the sap stops running or buds begin to form, it is time to take the tap out of the trees. The tree will fill the hole throughout the year, so there's no need to put anything in it. Both before beginning the process and after completing the last batch of maple syrup, everything must be thoroughly washed. I hope that you now know how maple syrup is produced. It's important to know where your food comes from. Maybe someday you will be able to help produce maple syrup somewhere. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to go taste test this maple syrup.